The Lost Son. The parable of the lost son is often called the parable of the prodigal son. A prodigal is a person who is a wasteful spendthrift. However, most later translations of the Bible refer to this as the parable of the lost son because the lost son is far more than a spendthrift, and the father in the story says his son was lost. A parable is a teaching tool. It is a story that illustrates a moral or religious principle. Jesus used parables often in his ministry. Jesus was teaching and attracted a large crowd. There were a large number of tax collectors and sinners in the crowd. The fact that Jesus was associating with what the Pharisees and scribes considered less than worthy people caused them to criticize Jesus. The Pharisees and scribes were leaders of the synagogue, the very religious people. Jesus told these religious people a series of parables to explain why he was teaching the lost and unworthy. The parable of the lost son is one of these parables. You will find this parable and the entire discussion in the 15th chapter of the book of Luke. The story goes like this. A man had two sons. The younger son came to him and said he wanted his share of his father's estate. The father agreed and gave him his share of the estate. The son gathered all the assets that the father gave him and left for a far country. The lost son wanted to be free from his father and be on his own. When the son got to the far country, he squandered everything he had in foolish living. He was a prodigal. When the money ran out, the land he was in had a famine, and the lost son was in deep trouble. So, the lost son found a job feeding pigs, but did not earn enough to even buy enough carob pods to feed himself. Carob pods grow on evergreen trees or scrubs and are native to the Middle East. It was considered animal food and a food of last resort for people in Bible times. It is still grown today. The seeds are ground into a powder, then constituted into small chips and used as a substitute for chocolate. Finally, the lost son came to his senses and decided to go home. He realized that even his father's hired hands had more than enough to eat. So the lost son decided to go home and ask for forgiveness from his father. He decided to tell his father, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me one of your hired workers." So the son headed home in shame and regret. However, his father saw him coming from a long way off and ran to greet his lost son and put his arm around his lost son's neck and kissed him. The son said, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." However, the father stopped him there and told the servants to get the lost son new clothes, put a ring on his finger, and sandals on his feet. Then the father told the servants that they were going to celebrate the son's return with a feast. He told them to slaughter the calf they had been fattening for celebrations and let the party begin. The son that was lost is now home and alive and well, so the party began. The older son heard the party and went to see what was going on. The older son did not take all this well. He was upset that his father would hold a party for the son who abandoned them and spent up all the money foolishly. He refused to go to the celebration. He asked why the father had never held a party for him like he was doing for the younger son. The father said, "You are always with me. Everything I have is yours. But I had to celebrate the return of your brother who was dead and is now alive." The lost son hit rock bottom before he realized the extent of what he had done. Jews considered pigs unclean animals, and the lost son was starving and living with pigs. It was at this point that the lost son realized what he had left when he left his father's house. The father had been looking for the lost son to return. We know this because the father saw the lost son from far off. The father was willing to forgive and able to forgive his son's sins. He loved his son unconditionally. The lost son never had a chance to ask his father for forgiveness. The father never gave him a chance after he sincerely confessed what he had done and expressed his regret. That was all the father needed to hear. The father not only forgave the lost son, he restored him to his place in the household. The father was so happy he threw a party. The father took him as he was when he returned. He would have been dirty and smelly, but the father had the robe, ring, and sandals put on him. The older brother was not happy because he did not see why the father was so happy. After all, the lost son had squandered everything he had and acted like a fool. The lost son had sinned against the father and left the household. The lost son did not deserve to be part of the family again. The older brother had remained respectful of the father and stayed in the household. He felt he had earned his position, and the lost son had not. Clearly, the older brother had no love for his younger brother. This is a love story. It's about unconditional love. It's about God's unconditional love for us. It's about us having unconditional love for each other. Do we love someone if we don't forgive them? Or only forgive them if we deem them worthy or meet some conditions set for forgiveness? So, what about you? Are you a younger son? Have you sinned against God? Do you need God's unconditional love?